a little aversion from him. So it's not him, it's because how I see him.
Correct.
So
and it's your aversion that makes you suffer.
Yes, I understand. So it's not him, it's the way I see him.
Right.
And how come it's connected to the ignorance?
That's what we're going to look at tomorrow evening.
Tomorrow, because the way I see it's like automatically how I see it, it's the aversion coming up, and
exactly.
I know it's my view,
exactly.
and I can understand my view that I can see, and I have a compassion to my aversion, but it's all the time with him. It's
right, and it's because no matter how good an intellectual understanding we have of the view, that's not going to change anything, because this is instinctive.
Yes, but what I want, I understand that, but what I want to know, it's all the time where it's this person.
Okay, and I think part of the answer is going to come after the meditation, and the rest will come later. I think part of the answer you'll get after the meditation.
It's like something outside make the
No.
No.
We think it is. Like we often think that person made me angry. A person can never make you angry. You make yourself angry. That person is a condition for you to get angry, not the cause. Because if that person was the cause of anger, it would mean everyone who saw them would get angry. And it's not every time you see them you get angry.
Yeah.
So what we need to distinguish, and this is something we're going to look at later, between what is the actual underlying cause and what is a condition. The cause of your anger is your habit of getting angry. And your habit of getting angry is coming from your distorted view of reality. So the only way you're going to stop anger is to overcome your distorted view of reality. Not just intellectually, experientially, but more will come later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. About feeling.
About
feeling.
About?
Feeling.
Feeling, yes.
Yeah. How we deal with that?
Right. That's what we're going to look at also after this session. And also that particular point we're going to look at in a lot of detail in a few days' time in an evening session. So that's still coming. But some of it we'll answer after the meditation. Right, let's do the practice, the compassion practice. So again, we'll do a 20-minute session.
Then it's with eye closed?
With these sorts of practices, whatever you prefer. Eyes open, eyes closed, whatever works better. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly. And allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. And simply becoming aware of the rhythm of the breath. Compassion is the wish or aspiration for ourselves and others to be free of suffering and its causes. Then we can begin by cultivating compassion for ourselves and then expanding out to others. And so again, no matter how much mental afflictions are in our mind, so no matter how much craving and attachment, anger and jealousy, fear and anxiety and so forth are in our mind, these mental afflictions are not part of the nature of our mind. They're merely like dirt covering the surface of our mind. And beneath these mental afflictions is the natural purity of our mind. So imagine this inner purity of your mind in the form of a small, white, radiant sphere of light in the center of your chest, at the level of your heart. And then arouse the thought, how wonderful it would be if I were free of suffering and its causes. May I be free of all suffering and its causes. May I be free of all mental afflictions. And then imagine your mental afflictions and suffering in the form of black smoke filling your body. And then with each in-breath, imagine drawing that smoke into the sphere of light at your heart, completely dissolving it there. So with each in-breath, breathe in with compassion, dissolving and extinguishing your mental afflictions and suffering at your heart, dissolving them into your inner purity, your inner wisdom. And then imagine the black cloud is now completely extinguished, and now you're completely free of all mental afflictions and suffering. And simply rest in that freedom. Rest in that purity of mind. And now, next, bring to mind someone close to you, a loved one, who's currently experiencing some sort of physical or mental problem or suffering. And imagine them very clearly in front of you. And arouse the thought, how wonderful it would be if they are free of that problem, free of that suffering. May you be free of all suffering and its causes. And imagine that problem or suffering in the form of black smoke filling their body. And with each in-breath, imagine drawing that black smoke out of their body and bringing it into the sphere of light at your heart, completely dissolving it there. So with each in-breath, breathe in with compassion, dissolving and extinguishing their suffering at your heart. And then imagine the black cloud is now completely extinguished, and now they're completely free of that problem, free of that suffering. And take delight in this. Now allow your field of compassion to expand out to the person seated next to you. They're just like yourself in wanting to be free of suffering. So arouse the thought, how wonderful it would be if they were free of suffering and its causes. May you be free of all suffering and its causes. May you be free of all mental afflictions. And imagining their mental afflictions and suffering in the form of black smoke filling their body. With each in-breath, imagine drawing that black smoke out of their body and into the sphere of light at your heart, completely dissolving it there. So with each in-breath, breathe in with compassion, dissolving and extinguishing their mental afflictions and suffering at your heart. And imagine the black cloud is now completely extinguished, and now they're completely free of all mental afflictions and suffering. And rejoice in this. And then allow your field of compassion to expand out further. And allow your mind to move around. And whoever comes to mind, whether it's a friend, a stranger, or even a difficult person, attend to them. May you be free of all suffering and its causes. May you be free of all mental afflictions. And breathing in with compassion, dissolving and extinguishing their suffering at your heart. And allow your mind to continue to move around. Whoever comes to mind, whether it's an individual or even a group of people, attend to them. Breathing in with compassion, dissolving and extinguishing their suffering at your heart. No matter how much darkness is drawn in, it is all extinguished without a trace. Breathing in with compassion. And then release all appearances and allow the mind to come to rest. And simply rest in that purity of mind, that freedom from all suffering. Which is in the nature of compassion. So let's have a look at anger, what it is, try to dispel some misconceptions about anger, and then how to deal with anger. So anger here is defined as a mental factor that sees its object as unattractive. So it's a mental factor that sees its object as unattractive. It exaggerates the object's unattractiveness and then wishes to harm the object. Why? Because anger believes that object is the source of our suffering. So what we see here in this definition of anger, as we saw in attachment, and actually is the case with all mental afflictions, is this factor of exaggeration or distortion. That mental afflictions don't see things clearly or accurately. And this is something also, I think, commonly understood in psychology. In fact, I've got a quote here from a book by His Holiness Dalai Lama where he says, "Recently a psychotherapist told me that when we generate anger, 90% of the ugliness of the object of our anger is due to our own exaggeration. This is very much in conformity with the Buddhist idea of how mental afflictions arise." Now, generally, we appreciate that anger is very destructive and that's something we want to eliminate. But still, there's sometimes some doubts. And one is, actually, I need anger in certain situations. In fact, I need anger to deal with difficult situations. Otherwise, I can't deal with difficult situations. Of course, no one's arguing that anger is not forceful. Anger is very forceful. But what we've seen from the definition and what we understand from our own experience, particularly if we're caught up in very strong anger, that we completely exaggerate and distort. We don't see the situation very clearly, and often due to that anger, we often overreact, and rather than effectively dealing with a difficult situation, we make it much worse. So the Buddhist recommendation here is, instead of getting angry, practice patience. But then, of course, when people hear that, they have a little bit of a strange idea what that means. So often people feel like, okay, to practice patience, I just have to sit there and do nothing. This is not patience. Patience is not a behavior. Patience is a mental attitude. In fact, patience in Buddhism is defined as an undisturbed mind in the face of a difficult situation. So when Buddhism is recommending we practice patience, what Buddhism is recommending is that when we're faced with a difficult situation, remain calm. That's patience. Because if we remain calm, we can more clearly and accurately evaluate what's really going on. And we have a better chance to respond. But then, if we can't resort to anger, if we need to make a forceful response, and sometimes we need a forceful response, if we can't use anger, what can we use? And the Buddhist answer is compassion. Often people feel that compassion is a sign of weakness and anger is a sign of strength. Actually, it's the exact opposite. Anger is a sign of weakness because it means we can't effectively deal with a difficult situation without trying to dominate someone. That's a sign of weakness. And compassion is a sign of strength. And remember, compassion is not about sitting there smiling and saying nice things. This is not compassion. Compassion is the wish or aspiration for ourselves and others to be free of suffering and its causes, which means if that other person is behaving in a bad way, then the compassionate thing to do is to help that person stop that negative behaviour. And if that person is physically attacking us, then if necessary, we use physical force to restrain that person. That's the compassionate thing to do. If we just sit there and allow them to beat us up, that's the opposite of compassion, because in some ways we're encouraging them to behave badly. But of course, if we allow anger to get in there, then often we use excessive force, overreact, big mess. Part of the problem here, though, I think also, is the word anger and our understanding of that word. And I think in psychology, when they use the word anger, it probably doesn't have the same meaning. And this became very clear to me recently when I read a book written by a psychologist who at one point in the book said, you know, you Buddhists have got it completely wrong. It's not about getting rid of anger, it's about having the right type of anger in the right time in the right amount. And then he said, otherwise, how would you deal with difficult situations like social injustice? And then it became very clear to me that he didn't understand how the word anger is used in Buddhism. And I think he was using the word anger to mean any sort of strong, forceful behaviour. Of course, for things like social injustice, sometimes we really need to use strong, forceful behaviour. But of course, if that's motivated by a wish to harm, then that's not going to work. So remember, in Buddhism, the word anger implies the intention